The 2006-2007 season was an interesting one, to say the least, for Sunderland Football Club. It began with a takeover, and Bob Murray sold the club to Niall Quinn and his Drummondville consortium, and it eventually led to probably one of the most unlikely of promotions. Sunderland had finished the 2005-06 season with a record low 15 points. It was an embarrassing year for supporters, culminating in a 4-1 defeat against Newcastle United at the Stadium of Light, probably the most embarrassing we'd seen up to that point at our stadium. But Bob Murray was keen to sell, and Niall Quinn was the guy to step up and bring his consortium to the table with the promise of a top-level manager coming to Sunderland, but initially it would be Niall Quinn himself in the dugout. A top-level manager was mooted, and there was reports of Sam Allardyce and Martin O'Neill, future Sunderland managers, coming to the Stadium of Light, but eventually it would be Roy Keane, of all people. Yes, Roy Keane, who famously had a huge fallout with Niall Quinn and former Sunderland boss Mick McCarthy and at the 2002 World Cup. So Niall Quinn sacked himself as Sunderland manager, brought the new guy in, and a new era began at the Stadium of Light. Sunderland at the time were rooted into the relegation zone, had won just one game, which was Niall Quinn's last in charge against West Brom, and Roy Keane had a big job ahead of him. The new boss was in the stands for that game against West Bromwich Albion, and Sunderland fans got excited to see what exactly the manager would bring, but of course there was concern that Roy Keane was an inexperienced manager, and those concerns were justified because at the time we'd been used to having managers who had bundles of experience, and our inexperienced manager Niall Quinn was struggling initially as Sunderland boss, so it was interesting at the time to see Sunderland go for a man with little to no experience. Upon being hired at the Stadium of Light, Roy Keane said, "I thought, what am I waiting for? The challenge is there. This is a big club with a beautiful stadium and a big fan base. And the fans here in the North East share my passion. That was important." Niall Quinn added, "The fact that one of the most influential figures in world football is willing to come here should make all the Sunderland fans very happy." And Roy Keane talked about this in his book that was released in 2014 and said, "The Championship was full of big historical names, Leeds United, Derby County, Leicester City, Wolverhampton Wanderers and Sunderland, but I didn't like that term, the sleeping giant. That was why I thought that me going into Sunderland cold was a good thing. I didn't care about the history at first. The reality is, this is where we are, near the bottom of the Championship. Let's get our house in order." As I got a bit of a feel for the club, I began to appreciate the importance of history. I met some of the ex-players, including Charlie Hurley, who was a massive star in Sunderland, and Dennis Stewart, who'd been in the team that won the FA Cup in 1973. I started to get pictures up on the walls in the dressing room and in the training ground. The training ground had the feel of a private hospital. Brilliant facilities, but cold. The walls were bare. Let's get some pictures up. Bob Stogo in the 1973 FA Cup, previous teams that had won promotion, and pictures of the fans. So Roy Keane came in with an idea to put a bit of character back into Sunderland, remind ourselves of who we were. But that's all well and good, but things had to improve on the pitch. And prior to Sunderland even getting to kick a ball under Roy's management, there were 6 players brought in on deadline day. These included Dwight York, Graham Kavanagh, Stan Varga, Liam Miller, Ross Wallace and David Connolly. So that gave us a large squad for the Championship, but undoubted quality came in as well, and that helped push Sunderland away from the relegation zone, as we'd see with results to come. The early form was good, 2 wins in Roy Keane's first games, both away from home. One a 2-1 away win at Derby County, and the other a 3-0 away win at Leeds, and it looked like Sunderland were really, really on the rise again and going to storm the Championship table. And the attentions of the fans were turned to, well, could this team actually get promoted? But a run of just 3 wins and 9 followed, and all kind of wasn't as rosy at the Stadium of Light at the time. Sunderland was sat in 19th place after a 1-1 home draw with Southampton, where a certain Gareth Bale scored the goal, and at that point it felt like Sunderland were maybe not quite on the way up as they thought, but it was all well and good. We were certainly in a better position than what we were after the first month of the season. But after that draw with Southampton, Sunderland were going to actually just lose 3 more games throughout the season. An impressive run, and that was basically what set us on course for the rest of that season. We picked up 4 wins against Colchester, QPR, Norwich and Luton in the next 5, which moved us into the top half. And a bad Christmas period, which was kind of basically our last losses until the end of the season. so a sandwich in the middle of the table. Roy Keane, though, pointed to a draw in that point as being pivotal to our season. We drew 2-2 away at Burnley, and he said, we were fighting, we were scrapping, we got a draw we hadn't deserved, and we'd scored an injury time in front of our fans. We showed a clip of the celebrations to the players because it had been on the news, on television. David Connolly had jumped in the away stand to celebrate with the Sunderland fans. One or two of the fans fell out of the stand. It was only a small drop, but still, they were head over heels on the pitch. But it was creating a story that we were all in this together. The players, the fans, the club. We're Sunderland and we never give up. We stay to the end. So as January came that year, Sunderland were probably on the periphery of playoff contention, but were largely in the middle of the table. But Roy Keane continued to change the squad. 6 players were brought in and 9 left the club at that point, but in came Johnny Evans and Danny Simpson on loan from Manchester United, and Martin Fulop signed after his loan. Carlos Edwards, Anthony Stokes and Stern John all signed on permanent contracts. So again, he was moulding the team and bringing in depth and quality as well, something that we desperately needed. And from that point, our results and form escalated. I'm going to read through sort of the results until the end of the season. So we won 2-0 away at Leicester City, 1-0 at home to Ipswich, 4-2 away at Sheffield Wednesday. We drew 0-0 at home to Crystal Palace, beat Coventry City 2-0, beat Plymouth Argyle away 2-0, beat Southend at home 4-0, drew 1-1 away at Birmingham, who were chasing the title at that point, beat Derby County at home 2-1, beat West Bromwich Albion away 2-1, beat Barnsley away 2-0, we drew with Stoke City 2-2, beat Hull City 2-0 in front of nearly 40,000 at the Stadium of Light, beat Cardiff City away 1-0, beat Wolverhampton Wanderers at home 2-1, beat Southampton away 2-1 thanks to 2 late goals, beat Queen's Park Rangers at home 2-1, and then lost, our only loss to this point, against Colchester United away 3-1 before that famous 3-2 win against Burnley at the Stadium of Light, which basically sealed our promotion, where Carlos Edwards scored the goal from the banks of the Wear, and we finished the season with a 5-0 win against Luton Town, and that result meant that Sunderland were champions from the position of basically being a team that people were thinking maybe get relegated at the start of the year. We built our way up that league table after a horrendous start, and even after Roy Keane came in, the results weren't exactly perfect, but from that sort of Christmas period onwards, Sunderland were unbeatable. Give for one bad performance at Colchester, but we've just picked up so many points, and eventually we won the league. And even though we didn't get to lift the trophy that day, it was still a magical moment that we didn't expect to happen. But in the summer of 2007, it's fair to say that Sunderland fans, while optimistic for the season ahead, were also a little bit hurt from 2 previous Premier League seasons where we finished with 19 and 15 points. And if you combine them totals together, it's still probably not enough to keep you up. So we had 2 disastrous years in the Premier League, and it was important for Sunderland to get it right heading into that next season. But heavy investment followed in the summer of 2007, something we hadn't seen in our previous Premier League campaign, but Roy Keane was able to go absolutely crazy in the transfer market and pretty much bring in who we wanted. We'll run through the signings. Greg Halford, Russell Anderson, Michael Chopra, Kieran Richardson, Dixon Atuhu, Paul McShane, Craig Gordon, Roy O'Donovan, Andy Cole, Ian Hart, Danny Higginbotham and Kenwyn Jones all came in that August window to varying success, the top end of that being probably Kieran Richardson, Craig Gordon and Kenwyn Jones. They were probably the 3 best players we got from that group, and also some players that flopped. Greg Halford, Russell Anderson, Andy Cole barely played a game, Ian Hart barely played a game. So there was definitely varying success in that transfer business, but there was enough quality brought in at that point to give us a decent squad, to give us a good chance of staying up. But we also saw 12 players leave as well. I won't go through all them, but a lot of players who'd kind of been there through that Mick McCarthy period left, and some of the players that came in the previous summer also left. The season started with a bang. It was a game. It was a lunchtime kickoff at the Stadium of Light against Tottenham Hotspur. Tottenham Hotspur, who were predicted to be in the Champions League places. They had just invested in Darren Bent, a player we'd see further down the line at Sunderland, but they had Dimitar Berbatov, Robbie Keane, Jermaine Defoe, Darren Bent. They had a pretty vicious front 4, and the rest of the team was just littered with international players, and the expectation was that this was going to be a very, very difficult time for Sunderland. It was going to be a difficult game. However, we held our own that day. Tottenham didn't have many chances, and we actually won. Last minute of the game, the cross came over from the right-hand side from Ross Wallace, and Michael Chopra controlled the ball and put it in the net and started his Sunderland career with a bang. And at that point, we're thinking, wow, if we signed this, Fox in the box, didn't quite pan out like that. But still, he gave us that moment, and for that day, Sunderland went top of the Premier League for a brief hour or two at that point, and it was good to be a Sunderland fan. It felt like we were back with a bang, and we could be excited about the season and not just worry about being an embarrassment like we've been in the previous Premier League seasons. We followed that with a 2-2 draw away at Birmingham City. We got another last minute goal, and that would be a theme throughout the season. Sunderland playing to the last kick of the game, the real Roy Keane spirit. That gave us 4 points, which is more than a quarter of what we achieved in the whole of our last season in the Premier League. So at this stage, Sunderland fans were feeling pretty confident that they would be maybe just more than survival. But that was the ambition. The ambition was to sort of get towards that 40-point mark and make sure we're in the Premier League the next season. 3 straight defeats followed, though, and kind of brought us back down to earth. An embarrassing 3-0 defeat at Wigan. I think we gave away 2 penalties that day. Was also followed by defeats against Liverpool and Manchester United. But still, it was a decent enough start considering the games we played. And Sunderland fans were feeling probably a little bit optimistic, and that was compounded when Kenwyne Jones, on his debut for Sunderland, scored as we beat Reading at home, which would prove to be a massive victory because Reading were going to be one of the sides down there come the end of the season. But after that point, we went 8 games without a win. That included a 1-1 draw with Newcastle at the Stadium Light, a game which Sunderland should have won and were dominant. But the performances were good, and that was the thing going through that 8-game period. We weren't playing particularly bad, but there was one asterisk in there. We lost 7-1 away at Everton. Pretty embarrassing defeat. Not actually our heaviest in the Premier League. Cough cough. Southampton in 2014, and that was the heaviest for Sunderland. But that rose the question at the time of actually, is this team good enough to stay? Because we were in the relegation zone at this point. We hadn't won in ages, and we were really, really struggling, and it led to a big game against Derby County at the Stadium Light. That was our next match, and Derby, as we all know, were really, really struggling at that point, but I think we were roughly on similar points at that stage. Derby had maybe got 5 points, and I think we were on 7, and it was a huge 1-0 win. Another last minute goal, Anthony Stokes scored, and that was huge for Sunderland because it gave us that boost into that December period, because if we didn't win that game that day, then who knows what would have happened. But another bad period followed. We did beat the basement team, but we followed it with 4 games without a win, and we also got beat by Manchester United 4-0 on Boxing Day. And at that point on Boxing Day, we were 19th in the Premier League table. Definitely question marks as to whether or not this team was capable of surviving. December finished with a win as Sunderland beat Bolton at the Stadium Light, and Roy Keane knew that if he didn't invest a little bit in January, Sunderland would probably struggle to survive. So in came important players: Phil Bardsley, Rod Aprika, which is an interesting one, and Andy Reid. We also got Johnny Evans back in on loan to shore up the back line. So the little bits of quality there, Bardsley, Andy Reid and Johnny Evans in particular, would add important depth and very, very important quality. There were upgrades on pretty much every position that they came in. Defeat at Blackburn at the start of January was followed by a win against Portsmouth and another home win against Birmingham as debutant Rod Aprika scored an important goal. After that point, though, Rod Aprika barely played, didn't really get his chance, but we have that one memory. And Kieran Richardson at this point, who spent most of the season injured, was starting to come on his own, playing, and he looked like a really, really impressive player at this point. Probably his best spell in a Sunderland shirt came in these January months that season. So in February, we picked up an important win against Wigan Athletic at the Stadium Light, with Daryl Murphy scoring a goal of the season contender. That left us in 14th place, pretty comfortable in the league at this point, but form dropped again, lost 3 of the next 4 and didn't score a goal. We even drew away at Derby County, though Michael Chopper did have a perfectly good goal disallowed for a dodgy offside decision. You see, and if VAR existed, we were an extra 2 points at that point. But those results left us perilously close to the bottom 3. And there was concern. There was concern that we were not able to string together a consistent run of games. We hadn't won back-to-back games all season. We hadn't won away from home all season up to that point, and we'd really struggled on the road. Finally, we broke that away day hoodoo. We won 1-0 away at Villa Park. Michael Chopra scoring the all-important goal. Not a player who is revered by Sunderland fans, but he scored some very important goals that season. We followed that with a 2-1 win against West Ham United, a last-minute goal again, this time through Andy Reid, a vital 3 points. And then to top it off, this was the run that really sealed our season and made sure we were going to stay safe. We won away at Craven Cottage 3-1. Fulham, a side who were struggling at that point, looked like they were going to get relegated, but we went there, back-to-back away wins, 3 straight wins in a row, and we felt like we were really, really pushing to survival, and it looked like we were going to do it. But 2 defeats followed against Manchester City and Newcastle United. The Newcastle game particularly disappointing because we really didn't show up, and the game was done pretty early on. At this stage, Sunderland knew they needed to beat Middlesbrough at home. This was a big chance for us to beat another side down at the bottom of the league, and it was an entertaining game at the Stadium Light. And with the game poised at 2-2, it was Daryl Murphy who managed to break the deadlock again, a late goal, and make it 3-2. And Sunderland won that game, and that sealed our survival. That meant we were safe in the Premier League with 2 games to spare. Something that, if you'd said, when Roy Keane came in 8 months earlier, that would be staying up in the Premier League, never mind being there, it just wasn't in question. At that point, it wasn't even in our thoughts. We didn't think it was possible as Sunderland fans. And the league table finished up with Sunderland in 15th place, 11 wins, 6 draws, 21 defeats, 36 goals scored, 59 conceded, 3 points from safety, it looks like, on the table, but we were more than comfortable. It was just the fact that teams at the bottom won some games, but we were comfortable enough with 2 games by the time we played 36 games, which was good. And Sunderland that season were known for their character and known for playing to the final whistle, and the points we managed to pick up in the last 10 minutes of a game was actually pretty amazing, to be fair. Michael Chopra scored the winner on the opening day against Tottenham. That gave us 3 points. We also got a late goal through Stern John on the second game of the season against Birmingham City. Other important ones, Anthony Stokes scored a last-minute winner against Derby County at the Stadium Light. Michael Chopra scored a very late goal at Aston Villa to give us a win. We scored a last-minute goal against West Ham United through Andy Reid, and we also scored a last-minute goal against Middlesbrough, which has been given to Emmanuel Pogatetz. When I'm checking that, I said Daryl Murphy before, but I'm still going to give it to Daryl Murphy. Sunderland survived in the Premier League, got that coveted TV money, and could begin to build the football club. There was the expectation now that we could kick on from this and consolidate in the Premier League. And the business that Sunderland made in the summer of 2008 really got fans excited, and I'll run through that now. In came Timo Tanio from Tottenham, Pascal Chimbonda from Tottenham, El Hadj Diouf came in, Steve Bronk came in from Tottenham as well, David Healy signed, Anton Ferdinand, George McCartney, and we also brought in Djibril Cissé on loan. Sunderland fans looked at that at the time. It was a lot of money spent, but it looked like we had a strong squad. We'd added quality rather than quantity, and really made the depth of the team so much better. And we were able to get rid of some of the players that maybe were hanging on in the previous seasons. And it was good to see that Sunderland were in the market for players like Djibril Cissé and Steve Bronk. They were the 2 at the time that really excited most fans. And the season didn't start too badly. Sunderland were in a pretty good position and managed to win away at Tottenham early doors. Djibril Cissé scored, and the birth of the Djibril Cissé chant. And it felt like we as a football club were heading upwards. We were going to be maybe pushing towards the top 10 this season. We beat Newcastle at the Stadium Light for the first time in 28 years. First time ever at the Stadium Light, first time at home for 28 years. Kieran Richardson, of course, scoring the famous free kick. And at that point, we moved into the top half of the table. We felt comfortable. It felt like Sunderland was on the up as a football club. But after that game against Newcastle United, the season began to unravel. There was talks of unrest. There was talks that Ellis Short and Roy Keane weren't getting along, and there was going to be issues there, and it felt like maybe our season was going to implode, and the results certainly backed that up. Disappointing evening in the League Cup. We did actually go through, but we played Northampton Town at home. Roy Keane had an argument with a fan and was also reported to have kung fu kicked a tactics board over. Such was his frustration with the performance. It eventually came undone against Bolton Wanderers at the Stadium Light. We lost 4-1 against a not very good team, and it felt like that was the end for Roy Keane at Sunderland. And we found out on the Monday morning that Roy Keane and Sunderland Football Club had departed. And I've got some interesting remarks from Roy Keane from his book about that now. He said, "I wanted to leave my mark on Sunderland, but I don't think I quite did. I did okay, but it wasn't good enough for me. We were promoted and we averaged a point per game in the Premier League, which on paper a lot of managers would take. But I wanted more. I could have done better. I didn't resign or walk out. I said I couldn't work with Ellis Short. An agreement was reached. I don't think he was sorry to see me go, and I didn't want to work for him. It still saddens me. I still think I should be manager of Sunderland. I really like the club. I really like the people." So there we are. That's it. That is the end of Roy Keane's time at Sunderland, which began with the club in turmoil at the bottom of the Championship. We had a euphoric rise. Somehow got promoted that first season in absolutely stunning fashion. The next season we stayed up through grit, determination, all the things you'd associate with Roy Keane. But after that, it became unravelled. He went away from his principles. He brought in fancier players, maybe players that weren't there for the right reasons. We moved away from what we were as a football club. And that's what damaged him, And I think if he could go back, he'd probably undo a lot of the business he did in the summer of 2008, and the business that I even applauded. Players coming in like Anton Ferdinand, Steve Bronk, Jibril Cisse, they were okay, but the other ones, Timo Tanio, Pascal Chimbonda, El Hadj Diouf, they never really hit the ground at Sunderland, and it felt like they were there for the wrong reasons. Timo Tanio particularly bad for injuries, but the others not so great, and it felt like it upset the harmony of the dressing room at the time. I'd be interested to know what you think in the comments of Roy Keane's era, whether or not I've done it justice, whether or not you think I'm looking at it with rose-tinted glasses, or whether or not maybe I was a little bit too cruel for him. Personally, I think if I was going to assess Roy Keane at Sunderland, I loved his time here. It made Sunderland feel special to me. I thought it was amazing we had somebody like Roy Keane in charge, but I appreciate the fact he made a lot of mistakes at the end. I think most fans, should probably recognise and probably do recognise that he made mistakes towards the end of his time at Sunderland. Ultimately, he set us up for a good period in the Premier League, and it wasn't his fault what happened afterwards. And maybe it was him leaving because he couldn't work with Ellis Short. Sunderland didn't exactly do great with managers after Roy Keane left. Anyway, if you enjoyed this, please like the video, please subscribe. This is a new style I'm doing. I'm going to try and tackle some of that eras at Sunderland if this goes down well. Obviously, if nobody thinks it's interesting, then I'll stop doing it. That's totally fine by me. Thanks for watching, and please share it if you've enjoyed it.